Yeah. Also, we need to make sure we let you know that I was a little bit intimidated because Dr. Drew Khan has a history in radio too.
Yeah, little radio, little television, past life. You've done your research. I'm fully recovered from that experience, and all better now. Yeah, I'm proud to say that from 1997 to 2002, I was the co-host of Channel 7's AM Buffalo with Linda Pellegrino. So I'm originally from Los Angeles, and so coming here, it was a really great introduction to Buffalo, AM Buffalo. But yeah, I'm in my comfortable home now at Buffalo State, and like I said, I've been a professor here for 31 years.
When was the first? Can I ask you before you get into the Anne Frank project? When was the first time you heard about Anne Frank?
Well, you mean Anne Frank, the girl?
The girl.
Oh yeah, so I'm a Jewish American, and raised in Los Angeles, and I kind of feel like I was raised on her story. It's really important, right? That this is a girl who represents so much about who we are as a people and how important stories are as a tribe, right? But also that she's an emblem of hope and security, and that you can. In spite of everything, I still believe people are good at heart. You know how she can say that in the midst of darkness. So I don't remember a time, to answer your question, in my life where I didn't know about Anne Frank. She's really important to us. And on the flip side of that, that's a concern too, because it's not fair to make a 13-year-old the face of the Holocaust, right? She's not a celebrity. She was a little girl who wanted to be a little girl. So very early on, to be honest with you, she's one of several heroes in the Jewish community that we depend on and whose stories. And, you know, to me, I'm really not, I'd rather consider myself not necessarily a theater professor, but a story professor. Theater may be for theater majors, but stories are for everyone, and that's really the research and how Anne Frank, the storyteller, has impacted our world. Did you know that the Diary of Anne Frank has been translated into more languages than any book or document in the world except the Bible?
Oh, I did not know.
So that's pretty intense, right? Good company, right? I've heard the Bible is a good book filled with some good stories. And that doesn't mean that there's that many Jews in the world. That means that this is a girl who got out of the circle of it just being a Jewish issue and said it's a human issue. Right, and that's something that we're taught very early on in the Jewish community. This idea, I'm going to throw some Hebrew at you right now, called Tikkun Olam. So Talia, since you have a Hebrew first name, repeat after me. Ready? Tikkun.
Tikkun.
Olam.
Olam.
That means repair the world. Your Hebrew is excellent, just like your name.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you. You are literally internationally famous, and I'm just so grateful to be part of this conversation.
That's nice of you. It's nice to have people who love you. So you know the thing about Tikkun Olam, repair the world. That's a Jewish ethic. That's an idea. Like I honestly, I really was a handful in Hebrew school. I know it'll sound funny to you, but I was a little chatty. And I like to talk a lot, and I would ask questions a lot, like why is God so mad all the time? Why are we doing this holiday, right? So those things were always, and they still are, things that I wrestle with as a Jewish American. But something I never ever wrestled with was this idea that we are here to repair the world. We are here to help. And I think that's why you go to college. You go to college to learn about yourself, learn about the world, and then decide, how will I, after those 4 years, how will my story improve the world's story? Those people get really good jobs, by the way. So that's an emphasis. It's a long answer to your question about why the Anne Frank project. And can I just tell you quickly, because I do want to hand it over to Jonise, why we're called the Anne Frank Project. In 2006, we did a production here at Buffalo State, and I was the chair of the department at that time, much more traditional theater professor. Where you know one of the greatest things I would say, to me, the greatest attribute about Buffalo State is that we are diverse, and by that, you know, we are almost 70% non-white, Well, that means that we have this opportunity to teach in this United Nations of SUNY, right? This proud, maybe we are SUNY's HBCU, and I say that as a proud emblem. But that means if in a theater department on such a campus, we can't just do white stories written by white men, starring white people. We have to include our black and brown stories, not just casting them as Hamlet, which is not really a cultural choice, right? It's a box choice. So in 2006, we had two Anne Franks. We had our Jewish Anne Frank, of course, but we also had a Rwandan Anne Frank.
Oh.
That asking the question, how many diaries have we missed? And the reason we chose Rwanda, in 1994, there was a genocide, the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. What was scary is that their stories were so similar. And so we ended up humanizing Anne Frank, so she wasn't this celebrity of the Holocaust, but we also said, wait a minute, there were some black and brown people where this was happening too, and it's happened over and over and over again. And we were never doing that show saying, someday this will grow up to be the Anne Frank Project. That was never on our mind. We were just trying to say, let's do shows that invite our black and brown students too. They matter as well. Well, our black and brown students responded, the community responded, and now 15 years later, we have this thing called the Anne Frank Project that uses stories as tools to teach valuable lessons in community building, conflict management, and identity exploration. And that's where we hang our hat. And that's where we'll focus on next week at our social justice festival.
Oh, lovely. Okay, so Jonise, can you tell me about when you first learned about the little girl on a Frank?
I, like many students in my generation, have learned about Anne Frank in high school. And it was just a small little snippet in that big, giant social studies book. So that's the first time I've heard about Anne Frank. And then I learned more about her with this project, with the Anne Frank Project. And yeah, she said some really great things. And I love that quote that Drew just mentioned, in spite of everything, I still think people are good at heart. I really strive. That quote for me is like a big thing for me. I still think people are really good at heart. But yeah, that's my experience with learning about Anne Frank.
Okay. So some of you might, I'm not sure if you too have knew or got a chance to look at who Albert Williams was. So I'm the great grandniece of Albert Williams. And so he was the first voting rights martyr out of Brownsville, Tennessee. And he and other members tried to register 5 black residents in a mostly black town, and it launched a terrorist campaign was launched. So we're in a place where it was like 89% black people. The white leadership had a complete conviction that people were, they called it obstruction of justice, trying to register to vote. And so people were run out, people were burned out. And then when things cooled down a little bit, my great-granduncle tried to arrange a meeting, but somebody snitched that they had heard him at the corner store arranging another meeting to talk about voting. And so he was abducted from his home by the sheriff and the police officer and a couple other dignitaries in the area, and taken in for questioning and released into a mob and was killed. And so our stories I have are all oral, mostly, because he didn't have a diary and didn't have words that he wrote down himself. In fact, if it hadn't been for my grandmother and a cousin Annie, I would not have known his name until 2015, when there was a white cold case investigative lawyer, Jim Emerson, who was able to get the unredacted files from the FBI, and he was interested in the case. And so because it was quiet for 75 years, right? So a lot of the family, I wouldn't even say some, a lot of the family just was like, well, that was a long time ago, or, they didn't want to think about bad things. And, but I didn't feel that way because one, it was a major part of my grandmother's life, and my grandmother just passed a couple years ago. And so she would talk about him. And I also know that it affected our family. Like, we were made into refugees. That's how we ended up in Michigan and such. So as I'm building this Albert Williams Voting Corner, I'm thinking about, like, how to make this story. Because I feel like not only am I descendant, anybody who, like, works towards the vote is a descendant of Albert Williams, in a tangential, way as well. So how would you, what things do you think that you've done really well with the Anne Frank project as far as making her story relevant to people in 2023? Mm-hmm. Because that was 1945. Like, how do you bring that current? I know that her story is in textbooks, so that helps. That helps. But beyond that, like, how do you make it current? You can talk a little bit about what you guys have done to make the story current.
She's nudging me here. Were you about to say something?
I'm going to Professor Nerd out just a moment, because first of all, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
And your grandma's story is no less important or no less vital than Anne Frank's story. And stories are really important. The idea that Broadway and Hollywood and that stories exist for entertainment, remember, historically, that's new. Stories were there because they change societies, right? They remind us of lots of things. They bring order to chaos. That's really important. I'll say it again. Stories, neurologically and psychologically, bring order to chaos. Your brain is wrapped in the same neural net that mine is. And my brain is not black or brown or beige, right? My brain's gray, just like yours. And it's wrapped in the same need for stories. In fact, neuroscientists and psychologists and historians will tell you that our ability to share and our need to share and develop and extend and surface stories is one of the reasons we're still here and talking. So it's not surprising to me, it's comforting to me, but it's not surprising to me that the story of Anne Frank inspired a story in you, right? Stories beget stories. And to me, stories are the opposite of the greatest tragedy of the 19th, 20th, and 21st century, because all of our tragedies and atrocities are the result of silence. And silence has killed far more people than any single tyrant. And in fact, our Western educational system, sit down, shut up, sit in a row. I'm actually going to reward you for being still and quiet, right? I'm from that same educational environment that you are. Well, then it's not surprising that we've created millions and millions of bystanders. We've actually rewarded young people for doing nothing. So our work is really about the opposite of that. And I'll say the same thing to you, and I'll let Jonise also give you her response, personal. I'll say the same thing to you that we say to every group, whether we're in Rwanda, whether we're in Buffalo Public Schools, whether we're at Buffalo State. You matter, and your stories matter. We, the Anne Frank Project, are here to help you tell your stories, because if you don't, someone else will, and they're going to get it wrong. I happen to think, and I'm story-centric, I happen to think that's why you go to college.
Yeah, and I think for me, with the Anne Frank Project, we really are inspired by her wisdom, and just going back to the production of the Diary of Anne Frank that Drew directed, not only was that meeting our Black and Brown students halfway, but also was showing like how many diaries, how many stories did we miss, and that was the first thing that came to my mind. You were telling me about your story, so I think now with this platform, yes, we talk about Anne Frank and we always share her story, but like it's also inspiring our students and everyone we encounter to tell their story as well. I'm going to quote Sophia Veffert here, a long friend of the Anne Frank Project and also Holocaust survivor. She was with us recently and she kept saying, you got to talk about it. That's how we overcome tragedies and stuff like that. We just gotta keep talking about it. So yeah.
The Anne Frank Project rooms are loud and noisy, and we love that. And we love that. Silence needs to stop being rewarded.
Okay. I used to say inaction is bought.
Say that again?
I used to say inaction is bought.
Well said.
It's also sometimes the product of self-reward, though. I think sometimes it's easy for us to not challenge ourselves by knowing our own history, because I feel like one of the reasons that it's such a pleasure for me to be here is because, one, I've been deeply impacted by Drew Kahn, Dr. Kahn, as an educator, right? But second, Leslie, when I was in the Anne Frank training that I did, and I remember texting you and being like, "You're going to love this. I'm so excited." I thought about like this ability that the Anne Frank project reiterates, that like one person, an innocent, like a child, someone who's coming to the world with so much innocence, can teach us so much. And that reminded me of my grandma. So for those of you who are listening, my grandma marched with Martin Luther King, and she was present at the I Have a Dream speech. It's Hispanic Heritage Month, and it is a privilege, thank you, Willie, to be on the line with the Anne Frank Project and Leslie. And I just think that for me, radio and these type of university spaces really are why I'm here. So I'm so excited to learn how to support both of you, and I know the folks in our audience are equally as excited to continue hearing the interview.
Yeah, Jonise Drew, welcome to 91.3 FM.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
In Rwanda, they would say Murakozi-chan. Thank you.
Wait, repeat that?
Murakozi. You want to do another repeat, Tony? This is not Hebrew, but it's Kinyarwanda. So it's Murakozi.
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 Chani.
Johnny.
Murakozi Chani.
Yeah, Murak like cozy, like a cozy sweater. Murakozi. Murakozi Chani means thank you very much.
Murakozi Chani.
Murakozi Chani.
Chani.
Yeah. We've learned a lot of our ethics with the Anne Frank Project. A lot of our ethos and our foundation was learned in Rwanda. There's a lot to do. But next, you talk about, we get people excited when we start talking about stories and they're mattering and what can they do next. That's what next week is all about. It's our social justice festival. And you were talking about some uncomfortable truths about African and African American history. We have a gift for you if you like an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, I love the uncomfortable conversations.
Will you tell them a little bit about a long talk?
Yeah. So we have a long talk about the uncomfortable truth. Two wonderful great men, Kamal Carter and Kyle Willens, and they are coming to do an anti-racism experience. We just had our first part of it, and I can't say like that. It's really impactful. Like me as an African American, like there's stuff that I didn't even know that I was like, wow, like everybody needs to know about this, and it's a really impactful session. Like our students and everyone needs to be a part of it. We have to learn tools and ways that we can be more than not just be racist. Like what can we do more? So they're going to be talking at our festival Wednesday, October 4th. I think 2 to 4 p.m. But yeah, we have a bunch of sessions that I would love to share with you guys. But that was a big one that we're definitely promoting as well. This is an important story and engaging conversation that we need to talk about. These are some
really vital anti-racist activists that are really important nationally right now. They work with Division I athletic programs, which, as you might imagine, are populated with 95% black and brown athletes. Well, that's not the same ratio for the coaching. The coaches are usually white, and the coaches are having a very difficult time, those who are honest, communicating, especially since George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, and had things percolated, how to gain trust amongst their athletes, their student athletes. And so they have come in to bridge that gap, and one of their greatest tools is that they are unapologetically sharing the truth of the history of African American and white supremacy. And it's a lot. Yeah,
it is uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah. But we got to get a little uncomfortable. That to me is a good sign educationally if we're going to make change. And there's a movement right now. People are burning books that make them uncomfortable. There are states that are saying no more Anne Frank, the Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
Right, because and their reason is that they're quoting white fragility or white humiliation. Well, if you really trace that, you're defending Nazism. That what you're saying is if we're you're not defending. There's no there's no the white. Obviously, we know the history is very colorful of our country, and white is not the first color that comes to mind. Yeah. Well, I have no problem. I mean, it's the truth of America. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and I'm a Jewish American, and I don't say white American because that's not what our people called us in Europe. Nobody ever talked about white or brown or black until they came to America, where it became an issue, and you didn't want to be treated like those black people, so you didn't.
Wow. So, Mr. Drew, that's the reason the separation or that.
That's one of the major reasons. Yeah, I mean that, and it's in the research. It's not like I'm opinionated or I'm not tweeting about it or Xing about it, right? I mean, it's studied. It's a response, and so these are just a taste. Let me give you another thing that shocked me, and it shocked me. So as a Jewish American, I thought I knew everything about the Holocaust, but I started doing some research, and then some more research. So after World War I, Adolf Hitler, you know that name, right?
Right.
Okay, he was considered too radical, even for Germany. So so he was in prison, right? And then the story goes that's where he wrote Mein Kampf, right? His final solution, his plan. Well, he did, but he didn't write that out of his own originality. Do you know what his template for Mein Kampf was?
Yeah, for Jim Crow.
Exactly, the Jim Crow law. So he said, wait a minute, America's teaching me something here. If I just take no Negroes out here and write no Jews here, this is a good plan. So it's an uncomfortable truth that America had a hand. And listen, I love America. Otherwise, I wouldn't live here. But we got to be honest that there are some things that we have to admit to so we can smooth our honest road to the future. And one of those things is what we kind of taught Hitler how to be Hitler.
Yeah.
So that's not comfortable, but it's true. I'm right saying it to you right now, and other people, and my heart like.
Mr. Drew, I just recently found out that. When it was going on with Hitler, America stood really didn't do nothing until it started affecting them.
Exactly. We turned away shiploads of Jews that said, not here. This whole idea about building a wall is not new. And we're a young we're a baby democracy. We're figuring it out. And listen, once again, I love my family, and I would not live here if there wasn't more good about America.
Right, it's still a good country.
Yeah, but exactly, it's an amazing country. But I'm a basketball fan, okay, and I'm from LA, so I'm a Laker fan. Well, I don't love everything they do. I'm still a fan.
Right.
And Dr. Drew, I just wanted to add, for me, hearing you and teach was so important to me in understanding the need of creating Latina history. And as an academic, I think that when I learned about the Holocaust, I was so deeply impacted, but not deeply impacted just because of the scale of the loss of life, right? But because of the different types of people that were targeted, right? And how Jewish families and how families across the world hid them and helped them, right? Like people who were being persecuted themselves. And for me, as someone who's neurologically diverse, the identity of eugenics as starting from colonialism, of thinking that indigenous people were somehow biologically lesser, right? And that seeping into every decision that has ever been made relative to power in the country has really sat with me. And anytime people try to talk about like almost a hierarchy of ability, I think of the Holocaust almost immediately because I feel like it's this lesson that we need to keep coming back to. And, I know that there are memorials and things like that, but I know that you all have an Instagram Live, correct? Could you all just maybe, Leslie, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in here. Could you say what the Instagram Live is and like how people can continue to return back to the story and visit the social media pages that you all put out, because there's a million people in this network of Anne Frank project, and it's so beautiful. I'm sorry to interject there.
No worries. Yeah, so our Instagram live show, AFP Live, is for students by students. We have two wonderful interns this year, Talia Oaks and Samaya, and they just get on Instagram and talk about whatever. Like, we don't coach them what they are going to talk about. They go on there and talk about whatever they like. And this started because COVID, obviously, and there was two interns who were like, well, how are we going to fulfill our credits here? And we were like, okay, well, how can we continue to share stories and tell stories? And they're like, well, everyone's on Instagram right now. So, and that's just kind of how it's formed, and we were just constantly sharing stories through there. And that is every Wednesday, 1:30 to 2:30. And it's just two lovely black girl joys. Like I like to say, there's a lot of black girl joy on there, and they're just authentically themselves, and they are around campus. And but they would love to talk to.
We work with them on the structure of how to do a talk show. So it's bringing back the AM Buffalo story. So we get to teach them about what it means to be a producer, right? And as you know, there's a lot of work that's involved in making a show like we're on right now. So they have to do that research. They have to connect with, if they want to talk about mental health issues, then they can, share their personal stories and engage other students, but they also have to engage experts, right? And we're on a college campus, so there's a psychology department, there's a counseling center. So they set up those interviews with the experts and to justify and hear more about the reality of those issues. So it's become a staple for us, and it really represents, Talia, I'm glad you brought it up, thank you. It represents a crucial pillar for us, is that the Anne Frank project's not mine. It's not Jonise's. It's the students. Yeah. It is the students' platform for agency.
Right. So I have a question. So we talk about this idea of experts. So that that has come up a lot. Like even in our own family story, it's like, who's the expert, right? Is the expert the one that has access to more information, or is it the family, or is it the academics that are able to, like what models do you have of working with people in the community, so it's not just all academics?
Yeah, the variety. You make a great point. Variety, right? Like your grandmother is as much of an expert on issues of history as an academic who may have studied that for a long time. So we keep on encouraging diversity of guests and expertise, and also asking that student the really important question that you're asking. Let's define expert. Right? We're all experts right now, right? Just ask people on social media. Everybody's an expert. So this is a really interesting. Exactly.
Don't take it too far.
Well, no, I'm hopefully people didn't know I was being sarcastic right there. It brings up a really important difference between reacting to something and responding to something. Reacting is what Twitter and those and X and those platforms are for, right? And it requires no education, no research, and no courage, right? We can just say, I said it, I'm done, I walk away. And, they probably are in their pajamas and their Crocs, right? Responding is different. Black Lives Matter was a response, right? And it needs, and a response that perhaps needs to continue in some way, shape, or form, right? How do we respond to these events requires education, requires experience, requires talking to experts from a variety of locations. And a planned response versus a reaction, I think, is why you go to college. So I know how to respond to these events so I can make real change. And that's what next week's about, too, is that we're going to provide tools and vocabulary for students, faculty, staff, community members who come to the festival to say, here, it's a mandate. 1/3 of every session is theory, but 2/3 is practice. We want our students to leave with tools and vocabulary, not another bag of maybes. Someday I'll do that, right? Well, we know about that. That won't happen. I don't care how cool the shirt was or the sticker or the pens that you got, right? So it's really about providing tools and vocabulary to make change and experience that this is what's required. And it doesn't mean that you have to have a national walkathon or a major protest. It means voting. It means stopping stopping that racist joke or that commentary before it ends.
Right.
It means stepping up and saying, no, that's not right.
Yeah.
You know, the greatest fear of all of these states that are pushing white supremacy by burning books, it's not the liberal left. It's that a third grader, their kid, is going to be taught how to empathize.
Yeah.
And once that kid has empathy, he's coming back home going, Grandma, Grandpa, you're not right about them.
Yeah.
Right, Drew, you're right on point. A lot of bad habits or thoughts that I had my children, you know, once they became age 18, 19, no, Daddy, that's not right. That's not right. No, don't do that, Daddy. No, say it this way, Daddy. Don't. So a lot of it is our children or young people or whoever know, no, that's not right. Say something, do, and it changed my mind about a lot of things.
I love that you shared that, and that's called evolution. We are evolving.
Yeah, and that's what some people are upset about. I went to a Real About Race workshop with Tim Wise, who you might know him, a couple of weeks ago, and he noted that, you know, CRT is 40 years old, but it's only been targeted for about 5 years. You know, like really, like everybody's talking about it. We need to stop it. We need to ban books and all that. And his theory is just that now we're seeing young people, it's seeping in. It's that level of fairness and equity is seeping into the school day.
Yeah.
And parents are, it's not the kids that are uncomfortable, it's the parents.
It's us.
Exactly. You know what? This whole a couple of years ago, everybody was concerned about triggering. You know, don't trigger them. Well, no, life's triggering. Absolutely, you got to have backup. So if somebody has an issue and needs some assistance, then there's a social worker there, counselors, teachers, friends, family, what have you. But this idea of that the kids aren't ready for it, you are all spot on, because what they see on their telephones on the bus ride to school is about rape, murder, war, pillage. Remember, there's 1,200 women in the Congo today will be brutally raped.
Wow.
But that's okay with us, right?
Wow.
And also Ukraine, and the innocent people are going to be bombed in a war right now.
Yeah.
Well, it's more comfortable not to think of it. But not thinking of it, if history has taught us anything, means we're not saying anything about it. If we don't say anything about it, then nothing happens.
Yeah. And Drew, I wanted to just, Dr. Drew, sorry, I wanted to just add on, that I think for me as a Latina, right, experiencing Anne Frank and the training and being in a space that's centered around her experience means so much to me, because I Googled that she was hidden for 712 days. And there are Latino children and children of all different backgrounds who are hidden in this country right now, who have had to be tucked away for different reasons. And I thought about the privilege that I had to be in a space centered around her story, because I think the message I was getting was like, from absorbing her story and the network that you've built and the community that you've built around it, is that there's hope for every single child, as long as they see themselves as a part of like this positive thing. Like Anne Frank just radiates positivity for me. And I know a lot of the children are going to go on like she did and make amazing impacts in the world. So, Leslie, I wanted to give you the floor back. I just wondered if you had maybe one or two more questions as we close the show, and just reiterate, I'm so grateful to be on the line with everyone. I'm in awe of everyone who I've been able to hear their voice on the other side of the line. I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, we are all of us are now bound by this common story, right? So that's why it's important. Talia, before I know that you've handed it over to your partner, but I just want to say your story can't go without being noted, that what you did is exactly what the Anne Frank Project is for. That you took the essence of that training and you walked it back to your life so you can make impact. Because you're right, there's an Anne Frank in every atrocity.
Yeah.
Right? So we celebrate the Anne Frank, because she was a prolific writer and a unique individual, but all of the Anne Franks who don't get that airtime. The Latina Anne Frank, the Somali Anne Frank, the Ukrainian Anne Frank, right? You can go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Sorry, never give a professor a microphone.
No, I'm just lost of your voice. so when I think about Anne Frank, so she was 13.
12 to 14.
12.
To
So
14, yeah.
so her diary was a gift given to her on her 13th birthday when they started to go into hiding. So you were right, Tali, with your math. She was in hiding for almost 2.5 years. She was on the last train to Auschwitz. She almost made it.
Right. So what's interesting about that, thinking about what Talia was just saying, so the mode for Latinos in this country right now is 11. So the most common age of Latinos in this country right now is 11. I mean, the media.
I didn't even know that. Oh my God, that's so cool. I didn't even know that. That's why I'm so grateful to just even be a part of this show. And that's around the age that Anne was when, she started developing her consciousness in writing, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
Anne Frank wanted to be an actress in Hollywood. She would have been a great theater major. I mean, this whole, you start telling stories, and then people tell other stories, and then people start making things up, right? The brain doesn't care if the stories are true or false. The brain just wants stories. So people have made her like this front row, prim and proper girl. No. She would have been put in the bad room. She was chatty, right? And there was the last person that should have been, she talks with the metaphor a lot, like that she felt like a bird trapped in a cage. By the way, a metaphor that Maya Angelou uses a lot too. Why is the cage bird sing, right? So I think that those types of similarities are like, of course she felt like that. Of course she felt like that. And she is the Latina she, is the Ukrainian she, is the African she, is the African American, is the Jewish she. That when we start learning what we're all reading in our sacred text, which is we're all the same, then things will go a lot better.
Well, I'm just so grateful to have the Anne Frank Project as a part of our neighborhood. I know that when I first met you and was interacting with you, it was in the basement of Lafayette High School, where the world comes to learn, Leslie, a school where there's probably 45 to 50 languages spoken. Leslie also had the same impact on me, just connecting with her about the strength of storytelling. So, just the one question that I would have for everyone on the line in closing, in my mind, would be like, what made you decide to be a storyteller? Because I think every single person here, Willie included, you all are just like bringing this energy of storytelling, and I'm so grateful to benefit from it.
I guess I would go first.
You tell a great story about your connection. You know about being an actress and a dancer.
I originally, I was a theater major for a good portion of my life, and people always told me I was really funny or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'll do this acting thing, whatever. And eventually, I really enjoyed it because it was a lot of the ticks that we hit: the community building and identity exploration and conflict management. But I always say, I love theater because it helped me be a better person to not only myself but to the people around me. And I was really amazed by that aspect of it. I really didn't care about doing this, being on stage. And so once I got to college, I was by my sophomore year, I was like, all right, I don't really care to do this anymore. And that's when I found the Anne Frank Project, and that it's using stories as activism. And I just love going into schools and just seeing those kids. You can tell they oh, thank you for seeing me. And it's so, because we all want to feel that way. We all want to feel seen and heard. And it just brings a tears to my eye every single time I go into those spaces. And but now I dance, so and dancing is my way of sharing stories, and just movement in general. I feel it's the best way to share stories. But that is my passion with stories, and it connects us all. And I think dancing also as well is a great bridge to connect everyone too. So yeah, that is my.
We're super fortunate to have Jonise with us.
Thank you. I'm super fortunate to be here.
Well, thank you. So, where were we? I think we're about closing. So, do you want to go over your socials?
Yes. Yes. Really, I'm so glad we're here now. Yeah. So next week we have our 15th annual Social Justice Festival. Drew talked about it a lot about it. It's 1 part theory, 2/3 practice, and it's a celebration of stories where our activists and artists and presenters are sharing their stories and hope to inspire our students and everyone to tell their stories well. We got to keep talking about. We got to keep talking. And so that is October 4th and 5th. Every year we get a featured presenter. So we have Autumn Rose Williams. She is an Afro-Indigenous woman. She's going to speak about Indigenous awareness and self-love and empowerment. And I'm really looking forward to her workshop. It's going to be a good one. But she speaks the night before, October 3rd, from 7 to 9. And she's going to do a regular keynote address. And then she's going to open up our festival the next day. And then I mentioned her earlier, Sophia Vefford, a Holocaust survivor. She's going to come and share her story and talk more about just being an upstander and not a bystander.
Sophia went to school with Anne Frank.
Yeah.
She went to school. I'm to say it again. Sophia went to school with Anne Frank.
Yeah.
Hard to imagine.
Oh, wow.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
Unfiltered.
I saw her photos and stuff. I didn't realize I was skimming.
Yeah, it's hard, for our contemporary students, the Vietnam War is ancient history. World War II is like, what?
Yeah, even when we talk about the 1994 genocide, they were like, no, that happened in 1994. They're like, that happened in the 60s, right? No, like, that happened, like,
Right.
Yesterday. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think those are all the highlights. It's a really great, it's 2 days, sessions all day. There's something for everybody. We have an ASL session. We, what else do we have? A cooking with culture session. We highlight a department here every year. So it's hospitality and tourism department. And it's and these slots are filling up. So you guys got to register like as soon, like eventually we're going to start turning people away. Like you really do not want to miss it.
Jonise, where can they register?
Oh my God, on our website. Oh my God, let me plug everything out here. So yes, you can follow us on our Instagram at Anne Frank Project. That's where you're going to find AFE Live as well, but we're constantly updating there. And how you're going to register is AnneFrankProject.com. And then you just go on there. You can scroll on there. We have little tabs. We have Learn, Engage, Attend. You go to Attend, Social Justice Festival, and scroll all the way down there. Register, you can volunteer. You can get a cool shirt with this logo here. This is our logo, for those who are watching on that. It's Rosa New River, but, African American. So, you get a free shirt, and, come and share stories with us. It's a really great time.
To everyone, thank you.
Latinas make history every day. Okay. How do you say this one? Latinas make history every day. Okay.
Why did your gun bang? He say, it's another story, just know these. You just wanna gun man. So tell me now, cause I want